I will start with introducing the first speaker of the three, who is Roberto Flore, and he's the head culinary research and development at Nordic Food Lab. So it actually started outside Noma, the restaurant, and now is under the connection under the at the University of Copenhagen. And Roberto's gastronomic path started in Sardinia. He's been working a lot with edible insects and many other projects, and we're looking forward to listen to you. Welcome.
Well, talking about insects, if you're gonna eat insect in the future, there's a kind of scenario where you have to dig in. This is actually me in the middle of the mountains in Japan and collecting killer giant hornets. So be ready to get into kind of similar situation. I would like to talk today about the Nordic Food Lab reality. I think it really matched really well in all the discussion because, I mean, the Nordic Food Lab is one of probably one of the first food labs that was created in Scandinavia during the whole evolution of the creation of the new Nordic gastronomy. And I really like this picture because it's really representing the diversity of all the things that we are doing right now. The Nordic Food Lab is a no-profit organization founded in 2008 by René Redzepi and Klaus Meyer. Basically, the idea of the lab is combining a really deep scientific exploration of gastronomy connected with the practical knowledge of chefs, and at the same time, approach food with a more humanistic vision. So all these three different images of understanding food are combining together the expertise. We try to build food diversity in Scandinavia, bringing from outside techniques and applying these techniques to Scandinavian products. So the idea is trying to create more diverse food. One of the probably main problems that I'm facing working as a chef is basically the huge disconnection that there is between the world of gastronomy and the world of production. Personally, my background study is agronomy, so I'm studying agronomy because I was really interested to understand what type of product I was going to use in the future as a chef. So trying to create a language that allowed me to talk directly with the producers. And so right now in the lab we are really aiming to close this gap, trying to be a bridge between the world of the production and the world where the food is basically produced and consumed and served to the customers. So this is one of the projects that we have done so far, so far. So many times we heard about talking about the future, and sometimes there is really less concern of building what is going to be the future. So futures has to start somewhere. And we think that working with children and try to create more consciousness in children is really important to have better future customers. This is a project that we are doing right now in the lab. It's called, I'm going to tell in English because Danish is not really my best language. It's called The Taste for Life. And the idea is trying to build food consciousness and food imprint in children's, giving the possibility to basically interact with their sense with food, touching, like exploring the different sensation that they can have approaching food. I personally grew up, I'm really lucky, I grew up with my grandma that teach me how to make bread, how to make pasta, how to cook it, but I also recognize that this is not something that everybody have as a lucky, and personally the kind of childhood that I had impacted me a lot. So I think this project is really interesting. Mixing culinary art with other types of interaction between art and design is really important. this is another project that we are doing with children's, trying to reduce food waste and trying to create, again, more consciousness related on how we are going to use our product. This is a technique that is coming from Japan. It's called the gyotako, and it's basically a fish print. The idea is giving the possibility to the children to play with the food. They print with squid ink the fish, and then we teach them how to fillet. And then we give the possibility to see that the fish is made by different parts. There is the fillet, there is the bone, and then we teach how to use those parts. So with the fillet you can make you can roast it. With the bones, you can make you can make a broth. So giving a kind of really different possibilities, and then they keep this at home as a kind of really strong image that is gonna stay in their mind. Sometimes, if you ask to our children, you know, they don't really know the real shape of a fish, or they don't know really what the fish look like. So. Talking about a little bit more about edible and inedible, I think like one of the problems of sustainability is the idea that many of the products that we define inedible is just, I mean, the idea that the definition of inedible is coming mostly for a cultural barrier. So the idea of not really perceiving edible a product is already like creating a huge problem of understanding how much food available is around us. So trying to change this perspective, the Nordic Food Lab started to work in one of the projects that probably make us more known in the world. That is the project related on edible insects. Edible insect is just a key to talk about sustainability. We can also just talk about unusual cuts, or like something that is just completely wasted. If we want to eat meat, we probably will need to face with this. You know, like sometimes it's really hard, but there is a huge problem related on food waste just because we think that a product like this doesn't taste good. And many times what is not good for us is probably a delicacy for many other people. So at this point, with this in mind, when I start to work with insects, I decide to start work on designing food that people would like to eat. You know, right now, many of the prototypes that are coming from many people working with insects is just trying to embrace fear, embrace that kind of, you know, like really atavic fear that people have with food. And my idea was trying to build up a more complex understanding of what actually means eating insects. So this is a kind of few picture of how, few of the picture of the dishes that I'm developing with the lab. This is a 100%, let's say, Scandinavia insect dish. Is a bee larva. Is a bee larva from the Bee Danish Association. We are using bee larva because bee larva is a bioproduct of the beekeeping. There is a technique used by the beekeepers that is removing the drones from the hive in order to decrease the varroa mites in the inside of the hive. So we are just trying to transform something that is a product that right now is just wasted or gave it to chickens into something that it could be used also as a human consumption. In terms of like designing and in trying to make like trying to express this beauty on gastronomy, we are starting also to collaborate with different other people in the field of like art and design. And probably one of the new projects that we will start really soon is in collaboration with different artists. Right now, in this slide, you can see in the left is a self-portrait of an artist, New York based. Her name is Miru Kim, and in the in the right, there is one of the dish that I developed. And is it a project related on vision and how humans can be more interacted into the ecosystem, and trying to basically build more visual effect when we are talking about food. This is the self-portrait based on how basically is like, you can see there is edible insect, there are some palm weevil larvae, and again is trying to create an interaction between art and gastronomy. I'm gonna conclude with the last part, just talking about our interaction in the university. The Nordic Food Lab in 2014, November 2014, become part of the University of Copenhagen. We are interacting right now into trying to build a more empathic way of understanding food in the world of science. Before we were working a lot trying to bring science into the world of gastronomy. Right now we are trying to bring the world of gastronomy into science, building up a new, more conscious generation of food technologists. If we find a way to put in the base of the big companies people that have the capacity or reflect of what they are doing, probably even the food for the large distribution can really take advantage of this. I make a really easy, generally, like one of the easiest way of talking about this could be the example of bread. Sometimes when we have to develop a bread that lasts a long time, if we approach this with the idea of like pure scientific mind, we are going to go into enzymes, we are going to go into products that they try to make long shelf life. If you're a chef, you just talk about sourdough. And, you know, so it's a kind of already well-evolved technique that have more than 1,000 years ago. And is like giving you the possibility to have long shelf life in bread. So trying to give always to the food technologists multiple choices, it can also give the possibility to create a better future for larger distribution. Thank you.
Afton Halloran, who is the PhD fellow at the Department of Nutrition, Exercise and Sports in Copenhagen University as well. And she's the co-author of a book called Edible Insects, Futures Prospects for Food and Feed Security, right? Welcome.
On? All right, so thank you so much for the introduction. And now I'm going to go back to the topic of insects, but talk about basically the development of a new sector and how basically in Sweden, I know that there's a lot of talk about insects for human consumption, insects potentially for animal feed. And I'm not going to necessarily give you any answers of how to deal with this future food, but I'm going to give you examples of our research group and what we have found in other countries. And hopefully that can be inspiring to some of you. So GREEiNSECT, I'll just tell you a little bit about our research group. GREEiNSECT is a 4-year project. Oh no, technical difficulties. Yeah, that's also okay like this. Yeah. So GREEiNSECT is a 4-year project sponsored by the Danish International Development Agency, and we're working primarily in Kenya. And we're trying to investigate the potential of insects, different insect species for feed and food as a part of developing green economy in the country. And so in Kenya, insects have traditionally been a part of diets in certain regions of the country. And so it's not something that everyone in all of Kenya have consumed. But these are wild insects, and we're talking about farmed insects. So in order to get some kind of knowledge about how to develop these kinds of systems, where do we look? We look to a place where this has already been developed. And so we ended up in looking at Thailand. And so as many of you may or may not know, Thailand has one of the most developed edible insect sectors in the world. There's more than 20,000 small-scale farmers contributing to a multi-million-dollar industry in this country. And keep in mind, these are small-scale farmers. These aren't large factory farms. And this is mostly happening in the northeastern part of the country. And so what we want to do is basically learn from that model of how do we develop these mass rearing systems? How do we rear large amounts of insects? How do we keep in mind that there could be risks involved with this? There could be risks in terms of human health, animal health. So we have to learn about these kinds of things. And this kind of knowledge isn't developed. And also then looking at consumer acceptance, environmental impacts, and how this basically contributes to greening the food supply. So I think one of the big highlights was when we took our whole research group, and this is including partners from the public sector and the private sector, so it's not just scientists. We went to Thailand and we met with the farmers. And so here we are, a very mixed group of many nationalities, not just Kenyans and Danes and Thai, but many other nationalities. And we're learning about how the value chain works. Here we are at a processor of light processing of crickets that have been farmed, and then those will then move on to the markets in different ways. And so there are urban and rural markets. There's different kinds of consumers of these products, and the Thai have been extremely innovative in a way to get people who have not traditionally eaten insects to eat insects and to be very excited about consuming them. And people primarily are doing this because they enjoy it. So this is a recurring theme here, that people are eating them because they like them, because they taste good, they're delicious. And they're not eating them maybe because they see this as having a lower environmental footprint. So here's what a cricket farm looks like. I like to show this slide because I think people have a hard time imagining what this might look like. This is in northeastern Thailand. And so that was a little bit of the bottom-up approach. And I think that we also have to look at the top-down approach. So when we had that north-south learning exchange in Thailand, that was just one part of it. So we also work with the issue of policy. And so Roberto and I and other colleagues have been involved with talks about novel food in Europe, but also regarding legislation in Kenya, for example, in Africa, actually, in the African continent as well. So the way that, when we talk about novel foods, is there some way that we can remove that novel part about it and just make it a food? Just make this a normal, acceptable food. And so right now, the legislation is changing in Europe. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but basically in 2018, it will be, in all of the member states, it will be actually legal to consume and produce insects. Well, you can find insects for sale in different countries right now. It's because the country has interpreted the legislation in a different way, because it's extremely ambiguous. So, and they haven't been penalized for that. So we have different kinds of innovation in this sector as a result of that. The Dutch being one of the nations that is the furthest ahead in terms of presenting different options of insect-based products to the consumers. And so what's next for this large group of stakeholders that we've involved? Because the interesting thing about being on the forefront of this new sector is that anyone can be involved. No, we've had so much participation from different stakeholders who we would never have expected before. So for example, in Copenhagen, one of the projects that is going to start up in the coming years is a series of domes, so like the one we're in, and this will be a part of the urban bynaturskoler, the urban schools, urban nature schools. So basically, I think you have the same system in Sweden, where children are allowed to go outside and be educated for a whole day outside. And so the plan is to create domes and have within these domes insects, and use insects as a teaching device for children. And so this is a partnership between the University of Copenhagen, other Danish-based institutions, and also the municipality of Copenhagen and several other different stakeholders. So this is something we're really excited about. The other initiative is one that we are really hoping we can get some funding for, and this would be looking at basically the impact of simultaneous consumption and production. So looking at why is Thailand so successful? Well, it's because they have a culture of consumption, but they also are producing the product themselves. And we would like to look at this in Cambodia, which has a similar history of consuming different insect species. So just leave my contact information up there, and I hope that you ask any questions that you think might be interesting, and any different things that I didn't touch upon today.
Thank you. Thank you, Afton. I think we're going to postpone the questions to the panel, right? Yeah. Yeah. Is Pia here? Yeah. We're going to have a short break, and I was going to introduce Pia Qvarnström, who actually I got in touch with first. I heard about the first time when there was a food truck up here on campus. It was called Mögel, and I thought that sounded very intriguing, as opposed to a lot of other food trucks were serving very conventional food. Unfortunately, I missed it, but there was a lot of talk here on campus about this food truck, Mold. And after that, I know that Pia has moved on to other projects, even though I think you still have the food truck. But please tell us about your new project. That is also in connection with Vinnova's new proteins, right?
On? Yes. Yeah, as you said, I started with a food truck serving fermented vegan organic food. And my main thing has always been tempeh. It's an Indonesian tradition where you use a special kind of mold, a razor-post mold, fermenting legumes of different kinds. So I use mostly split peas, Swedish split peas. And today we're going to try 2 different kinds of tempeh, one with split peas and one with grey peas. Yeah, and it's on a sourdough bread with some pumpkin puree and fermented vegetables. Yeah.
We're looking forward to a 20-minute break and try out Pia's food.